You're listening to Nutrition Matters podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Nutrition Matters podcast explores how to approach food and your body in a whole new way. I interview people who share stories and expertise in rejecting diet culture, making peace with food, and discovering a more positive, realistic, and sustainable approach to health and well-being. I'm Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist, and owner of Positive Nutrition, an in-person nutrition therapy practice in Salt Lake City, Utah. I offer free resources, including this podcast, a blog, and posts on social media. If you're local to Salt Lake City, check out our services and availability for appointments, and keep your eyes out for in-person groups on mindfulness, intuitive eating, body image resilience, and more. Go to positive-nutrition.com and hit subscribe if you'd like to keep in touch. I also offer online courses covering topics like the science of nutrition, mindfulness, and healing your relationship with food. Check those out at positive-nutrition.com/academy. If you like what you hear on the podcast, you can make a difference by leaving a review, sharing with friends and family, or making a donation. Thank you so much for your support. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook if you'd like to have a little more food for thought at Paige Smathers RD. Thank you so much for listening. Hey Shannon, welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
So take a sec to talk about who you are, introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, and then we'll dive in and talk about our theme for the day.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Shannon Ricks. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've really taken a passion and interest in eating disorders. So that has really been my specialization for the past 5 years. And then also I love to work with people going through faith crisis and faith transition. I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah, and these days I'm doing all online sessions, but hopefully we'll get back to my downtown office sooner rather than later. But yeah, that's me.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me, because I've been doing a couple kind of solo episodes about what's going on in our world right now, and I thought it was just about time to bring on another voice, another perspective, and someone to kind of bounce ideas off of each other and explore kind of the situation we're finding ourselves in right now globally with this pandemic and kind of what that brings up for us food-wise and mental health-wise and eating disorder-wise and all of the above. So that's our goal today, is just to kind of talk about some of the themes that we're seeing in our client sessions and see if we can put something out there to be a bit of a resource for people as they're navigating this new normal. Does that sound like a good sort of introduction in our intentions?
Yes, because it'll be nice to hear some of your perspectives too, see if we're noticing the same trends in both of our client populations. And yeah, really cool.
Awesome. Okay, and I'll just warn everyone that my kids are having a virtual tea party in the other room on FaceTime, so with no adult supervision. So if it gets loud on my end, I apologize. This is the realities of working from home and of the situation we're all in. So thanks for your patience with that extra noise too. So Shannon, what have you been feeling and thinking kind of personally going through the last 3 or so weeks of this pandemic? And then we'll kind of move more into what our clients are experiencing, but I'm interested to hear, like, how are you? How are you doing? How are you handling this?
It's freaking weird. Yeah, I got home from a trip to Thailand, and the day after I arrived home, there was an earthquake here. And so it was just like boom, 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 just a lot of getting used to life back at home, and has never been more challenging because there was, not people to talk to, or there wasn't a job to go to. Everything had changed since I had left just in that course of 2.5 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, it took some adjusting for sure, being a person who lives alone and stuff, but man, now that the sun is out and I have kind of gotten into a routine and then I'm kind of enjoying it now. As weird as that sounds, like I don't mind it too much
Yeah. Okay.
anymore.
Yeah, that kind of brings up one of the things that I'm seeing and hearing is no two people seem to be responding to this situation the same, right? Like,
Quite the same. Totally.
and there's no right way to experience this, but I think at the same time a lot of people are sort of maybe feeling shame if they hear, oh, like my best friend is super anxious. Should I be anxious? Is it okay that I'm doing okay? Is it okay that I'm struggling more than my family? Or, I've kind of been picking up on that theme in my client sessions over the last few weeks of kind of almost like there's no one way people are responding, and there's a lot of comparison and kind of feeling bad if your reality isn't the same as someone else's reality.
I can so relate that because I felt like that first week back, like I was having a way harder time with it than my family was. And I was feeling like, what the heck? Like, what am I doing wrong? And then now almost like feeling a little bit guilty that I am doing so okay with it. Like, so I'm totally seeing both ends of that.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you're on social media, but are you? Let's just
Like, okay,
answer that.
so I was that first week and then I got off it for my own mental health, which
Okay.
I highly recommend, by the
Yeah.
way. So
Okay, so
I'm just on
what were you
TikTok.
seeing that was contributing to poor mental health for you online?
Comparisons. I mean, really, and there was just so many articles, so many opinions. It was people either being like, this is messed up, this is blown out of proportion, or hearing messages like, you're being so socially irresponsible and inconsiderate if you leave the house. Like, so many messages. Like, I just couldn't. There's too many.
Yeah, I'm seeing, here's what I'm seeing as I'm kind of scrolling through my stuff. First of all,
Yeah.
I actually got off of social media in the beginning of this whole situation because I just couldn't handle seeing people not believe that this was real. I was like, "Oh, I can't put that into my head. Like that's just not not helping me right now." So I
Yeah.
got off, but then I decided after a couple of days I was like, "You know what? If there's ever a time to kind of come together and support each other, maybe now's the time." And again, like my thinking is different than your thinking with that, and hopefully we can kind of model to other people like that's okay. And also like taking care of yourself is really important. So anyway, my point in saying all of that was like then I hopped back on and it was like, whoa, it was such a whirlwind. It was some people were saying, you know, uh, keep exercising, keep blah, 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 keep doing all the things you're doing. If you're not doing that, then you're so lazy and you're not using this time appropriately. And then I was seeing other messages like, just sit on your couch or like, just don't, like almost like you're a problem or you have a problem if you're having some routine right now or if
If you
you're,
can't just sit, if you can't just be okay with this or something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I find just it's so interesting whether people are really saying those messages that way or for whatever reason, maybe my brain or our brains sort of like to put it into boxes like, oh, that person's being extreme over here or that person's being extreme over there. It kind
Hmm.
of feels that way. Like, regardless of what people are actually saying, I kind of leave social media feeling like, gosh, everyone's just talking on the peripheral. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a lot to take in addition to navigating your own feelings and thoughts and mental health and self-care and then thinking more globally. It's a lot. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, like it's weird because it's a love-hate relationship like most people have with social media because I know that if you have supportive people or if the type of messages or people you're following are like really pro on like mental health and self-acceptance or the things that matter to you, it can be a really great, safe, supportive space. But I also know it can just be a free for all of, yeah, opinions on on the perimeters of things, just all of these extremes, and like, what should I do? I was like, there's too many choices, and either way, I'm wrong to plenty of people, whatever choice I make. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and we can fall into that comparison trap even in this situation where I truly believe there's no right way to do this. There's no model, there's no blueprint. We're all figuring things out as we go. And there's going to be a process with this. Like you mentioned, that first week where you just felt like you were having a really hard time. I really relate to that. I think my first week in this situation, I felt like my brain kind of couldn't work. It just wasn't functioning. I was kind of like, uh, not even able to like think or respond or produce any meaningful thought patterns. It just kind of didn't fire
jump.
right.
Yeah,
Um, and so giving ourselves time to be in our own process, our own part of our own journey with this is, I think, really helpful. And when we start comparing, it can make it even harder on ourselves.
totally. Absolutely. I mean, and that's how it is with tons of situations too, though, right? Like not just this situation, but it's like all these comparisons like tend to just usually not help. Like
Yeah.
comparisons are the thief of joy. Isn't that some famous quote or something? I don't know.
It's in there. It's in my brain. I think you're right.
Yeah.
So what kinds of themes are coming up with your clients that you work with? What are people saying about how they're experiencing this and what struggles they're having, or even the good things that are coming out of it for them? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so I'm hearing that people who were kind of in a better place with their mental health tended to not be in as good a place with their mental health the past couple weeks. And so people who have underlying anxiety, especially experiencing the earthquake that we did here in Salt Lake City, that really skyrocketed a lot of people's anxieties. And so that was a big trend that I saw was peaked anxiety, and then greater depression with like the lack of social connections, the lack of purpose, the lack of society, meaning nature, all of those things. Um, so yeah, definitely mental health is on the forefront of my mind and definitely in all of my conversations.
Yeah, I've had people ask me like I'm worried about my husband. He lost his job. He's not
Mm,
shaving. He's not getting out of bed. He's wearing his pajamas all day. And I'm someone that they trust, but they know I'm not a mental health expert. But people have been saying like, is that normal? Is that happening in your house too? Like, how are your loved ones responding to this? So let's just kind of hit on some of those. Is this normal? Questions maybe you're hearing or having people wonder, or maybe you're wondering yourself. Like, let's talk about that. What do you think?
totally. I think it's totally a normal reaction. I mean, I think there's different types of anxiety, and I think the type that we're used to dealing with more is just like this compulsive or chronic, but like there's some actual things to be anxious about. Like for any even person who's not an anxious person, there are some reasons to be worried. There's actual risks to our health. There's actually actual risks to our job and our security. So it's so valid to be anxious right now. Like I'm almost weirded out if someone hasn't been anxious throughout this process because that wouldn't be a very normal human
Yeah, like
response to something that's threatening your environment.
anxiety isn't a bad thing. There's purpose to it. It's supposed to motivate us to do something, right? But then it can become chronic if it's like you're just like looping through it and cycling and not able to sort of process which parts are useful and which parts kind of just make you feel stuck or make you just like want to um just really struggle a lot. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely think that's very normal. If you are anxious, yeah, it means your human body is working the way it was made to work, to
I
respond
love
to
that.
threats. the environment. So
Yeah.
that for sure.
Well, and then also it sort of gives, so I have a couple friends just in my personal life who struggle with their mental health, and I had one person tell me like now, like the way that you're feeling right now is kind of how I feel pretty much all the time.
Hmm.
And that was like hard to hear and sad to know about this person that I love so much. But also maybe that's something that those of us who have experienced a real dip in our mental health right now, we can leave this situation kind of with more understanding of people we love who suffer more than we do, maybe.
A great point. Yeah, just leaving it, being more empathetic now, like knowing that, like, wow, aren't I grateful that I don't feel like this all the time, like some people who do,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Great, great point.
So that comment of like, is it normal that my husband isn't shaving and isn't getting dressed or whatever? I have experienced. I'll just self disclose. Like I've experienced thoughts in the morning that are new to me. Like I'll kind of be like, oh, what's the point? Why, like,
Fair.
why even get out of bed? Like, what's the point? And not totally in that place of like, what's the point of living, but kind of like, what's the point of even getting out of bed right now?
For sure. Well, like
Yeah,
definitely, it's like, what's the point of showering? Like, I
totally.
definitely have that
What's
conversation
the
with
point of
my own.
showering? What's the point of changing my shirt and getting,
Yeah.
not smelling terrible? Like, who cares, right?
Yep. I can relate.
Yeah. So, what is
So,
the point?
what is the
Just
point?
kidding.
Right. And when there is not a purpose to your life that is handed to you that's external, you're having being forced to look within and being like, what is my purpose today? Um, it's really frustrating to not be able to work towards these greater goals, like these career goals or whatever. So that makes total sense. But if we can reel in our thinking to just focus on today and have a one purpose for this morning, like if it's just calling up this one person and putting a smile on their face, if it's loving on my pet and that is my purpose today, like cool. Like that's all we need. But I think that's really hard to find new purpose in life, right? I mean, that
Oh,
doesn't,
yeah. That was such a
yeah,
good point you made, Shannon, about how we're so used to external things giving us that purpose. And this situation is really calling us all to find that intrinsic sense
yeah,
of like, I matter, even when all I did today was like love on my kitty or whatever, right? Like that's good.
totally.
I'm a good person, even though I didn't get all this external validation today or whatever.
Right. Like, how can we celebrate these like really small things that I get that we wouldn't celebrate on a normal day in normal situations and normal mental health? But like, yeah, at this time right now, like, freak, you give yourself applause because you made some dinner. Like, like that needs to happen. I think we
Or
need to
like you
celebrate
showered,
small stuff.
you got out of bed and got your day going. Like those little
Yeah.
cheerleader moments of like, yeah, I'm doing it. Or even like, hey, I rested and that felt really good and that was really like what I needed right now. Go me for meeting my needs. Like that I love that. Giving yourself credit for those little things that are actually the big things.
Totally. And this is something I speak to at any time of year with my clients when they are in a more depressive space to lower their expectations because your expectations for yourself on a day when you wake up in a great mood needs to be different than expectations when you are having a hard time getting even out of bed in the morning. And so, yeah, setting those expectations just kind of lower, honestly. Like, let's not expect that you are going to have these incredibly productive days like you maybe used to a month ago. Like let's just take that off the table, right? And make
Totally.
a new set of expectations that's just lower and more realistic, more manageable. So yeah, so we're not being overwhelmed and feeling ashamed when we can't hit those bars that we've set for ourselves.
I love that. I'm actually a really big fan of low expectations in a lot of areas of life. And I know that sounds really pessimistic, but so those of you who listen to this podcast regularly will maybe know this story, but my husband is big on low expectations, and I'm the one who oversells everything. Like, we'll have people over for dinner and I'll be like, this is gonna blow your mind, you guys. Like, this food is so good. Like, just you wait. And he's always like, Paige, what are you doing? You have to, like, you can't do that, or else no matter what, it won't be as good as it could be. And so he's really taught me the value of, it's not that you don't care, it's not that you don't try, it's not that you don't um progress in your life, but sometimes just saying, like, okay, this is good enough, or this is kind of what I'm aiming for today, and it's low, but I'm going to feel really happy for even doing that. Like, there's some real wisdom to low expectations.
Absolutely. It's to that good enough, right? Like, just to be saying, like, this is good enough. Like, yes, absolutely.
Good enough. And, to connect this to even like food stuff, that's essentially what we're aiming for with lots of areas of self-care. Like, we're just trying to do good enough. Get enough food, get enough rest, get enough movement, get enough hydration. Like, it's a lot of these things that we're working on right now. We're kind of back to some of the basics of almost parenting ourselves and being like, okay, now it's time to get out of bed. Now it's time to drink some water. Now it's time to eat breakfast. Now it's time to go outside. Now it's time to rest, or whatever. I've found that I need extra sort of explicit self-care, whereas normally in my life I'm kind of like, okay, got to be there at that time and got to go. Right now it's sort of like, okay, my day is so unstructured that I kind of need to build in some structure so that I am like meeting my needs, because it could be really easy to let a whole day go by and be like, whoa, I feel really not good, and it's because, like, I didn't meet my needs today,
That made me think of how, and I'm wondering if you're noticing this too, whereas some people who would have identified as like intuitive eaters are now having to go back to following a meal plan or have that type of structure that they didn't need for a while, or they weren't needing to do that. Are you seeing those trends in your practice?
Yeah, so I actually am a fan of structure with food, like regardless of the time of what we're going through. I think most humans thrive off of somewhat of an idea of kind of when they're going to eat, especially like planning that around schedules and around life events, and also planning to be hopefully hungry so that you can eat with your loved ones or get together with friends, right? So sometimes I think sometimes the conversation of intuitive eating can kind of make it feel like you're just so in tune that you just know exactly the moment when you need some food. And I found that a lot of people kind of do best when there's some flexibility for sure, but like some sort of general windows of time where they eat. But I agree with what you're saying, that right now there's sort of seems to be a real wisdom and skillfulness and sort of almost recommitting to that as like, oh yeah, I'm relearning how important it is to take time to eat, to take time to make sure I'm drinking fluids, to make sure I am going to bed at a time where I can wake up and, start my workday from home or whatever. Some of that kind of routine and structure, I think, is sort of, people are kind of not buckling down. I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of coming back to that and being like, oh yeah, that is an important thing for me.
Totally. To like have a bedtime. I've noticed that, when I was like, I'm just going to be intuitive with my sleep. That's what I was thinking. Like for the first week, I'm like, well, I'm just going to see how long my body wants to sleep in, or like what I want to wake up. And like, man, it just went kind of off. Like I was like, okay, I need to set my alarm. Like I need to get up at a certain time and get some structure. At least that's how I did it with my day.
Yeah, that's such a good metaphor, I think, for what I was saying earlier about structure with food. It's very similar to a bedtime, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
always tired at the time where I'll say for me it's like 9:30 or 10. I'm not always tired, but I feel so much better if I at least like
Feel good.
close my
Yeah,
eyes and start resting around that time.
totally.
And if I were trying to be a perfectly intuitive sleeper, you better believe my world would look really chaotic. I'd be napping, I'd be staying up super late, I think my mental health personally would be way worse if I didn't have some structure around when I go to bed and when I wake up.
Totally. I totally agree. And I learned that lesson recently.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like we're relearning some of these basic things about ourselves. We're like, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
bedtime.
bedtime. Okay, that's important. I think that's been kind of funny for me, relearning stuff that I've known, but I have to kind of relearn.
Totally. Pay more attention to. And into with the eating structure thing, I just feel like people just need to have, I don't know, more pay attention to that meal plan because hunger and fullness cues tend to get messed up when you're
Exactly.
really anxious. And that's for anyone and everyone. If you're super anxious, like you're just, yeah, a lot of people either will emotionally eat when they're really anxious or just not feel hungry because they're in this like fight or flight mode. So that's like especially important
Yeah, that's
to
how I
know.
felt the first week. I felt like really nauseous sometimes because I was anxious, and then I would get really hungry and kind of feel like I could never really get full. And it was a really interesting thing to observe in myself from like a non-judgmental place, just to be like, whoa, yeah, my appetite is funky. And
Mm-hmm.
that happens periodically because I'm a human. And when that happens, it's perfectly fine to eat even when you're not hungry. Or to just kind of revert to like, yeah, I know this is probably the amount of food that fuels me and that feels good on a normal day. So I'll just have this for lunch right now, even though I'm not really sure how I'm feeling. We don't need to put
Sure.
our pressure on ourselves to know exactly, to be super in tune with hunger and fullness and what sounds good and what's satisfying when we're in the middle of a global pandemic, you know,
Right.
or
Right.
ever, but especially right now.
Absolutely. Kind of we're back to basics. That's, yep.
Okay, so Shannon, one of the things that's going around that's really icky is a lot of people have a lot of angst about weight gain during this time. And simultaneously, people are cooking at home more because we have to and because we have time or whatever situation certain people might find themselves in. I've also had people reach out saying, what should I do? I'm cooking more and I'm really like excited about it and it's been fun for me. And I've even been posting some of the things I'm making, and all the responses I've been getting back are, you're going to gain weight in quarantine. And just feeling super frustrated with this juxtaposition of, I'm finding joy in food, I'm reconnecting to like the pleasure and excitement of cooking, yet I have all these people around me who are super nervous about gaining weight and just, I don't know. I'd be
Rejecting that.
interested to hear what your thoughts are and what your reactions are to that.
Yeah, so I haven't heard of like that specific example. That sounds like super frustrating. I'd be so mad. I'm like, don't take away my joy. Like, just be happy for me. Like, this looks yummy, right? But but definitely that fear and what I really saw kind of that first week or like 3 weeks ago with the scarcity, there was there was a lot of fear of food scarcity. So people, going to the grocery store and buying up maybe more food than they would need. And in response, and I'm not sure why this was the response, but people kind of eating more than they normally would during that first week as well, sort of feeling like there was some that scarcity mentality there, even though there wasn't. Did you see any of that?
Yeah, I think the empty shelves like really mess with people. And you know what? To be honest, like I just went to the store today and it's messing with me too. Like it's a really creepy sight to see. So I can see where like the scarcity thing can really come up right now because there's a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty.
Totally. And I know that that drives at least like some people's eating disorders is like, yeah, that fear, like, okay, well, we better eat it all now. We better get it all now, or because there may not be any later. So, contributes to that like binge purge or binge restrict cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And whether that's a self-made sense of scarcity through a diet, or that's a
Sure.
true sense of scarcity like a famine or perhaps
Mhm.
empty grocery shelves at the grocery store. I think it's important to know like that is a normal human response to scarcity. There's nothing wrong with you if you're kind of feeling funky around food right now. You're definitely not alone. And also, like you were saying earlier about the anxiety, I would say the same thing about food. Like that's your body and mind just functioning the way that it should.
Sure. To a normal, yeah, it's a normal, healthy human reaction. Um, and back to what you were saying about like um, how they were projecting their fears of gaining weight onto your one client. Um, yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing supportive messages. At least I've seen this from like my dance instructors or like people who I would take dance classes from, and they'll post like, it's okay for your body to change because your routine has. And I think that's so true. And I have to be trusting in my body enough that like it all evens out, right? It still has a set point. Even if it is going to gain some weight right now, it still has a set point, and I can trust that my body knows what to do with this,
Yeah.
and that it also isn't a forever thing, or even if it is, that's okay too. Yeah, how have you done with that?
Yeah, I've had enough experiences in my life of going on a vacation, and I don't weigh
Yeah,
myself personally, so I don't really always
for
know
me.
what my body does with shifts in routine. But there's times where it's like, oh yeah, I can kind of tell that like something's shifted in my body. And
Yeah.
I love what you're saying. Like that, first of all, that's okay. Second of all, that makes sense. Third of all, my body knows what to do with this. And just like we're shifting to this new normal of being at home, eventually we will shift to a new normal of being out and about and living our regular lives, I hope. I mean, I don't know. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so I think that where people one of the things that just really resonates with me as like a kind of zoomed out big picture philosophy is that everything is impermanent, right? So
yeah.
everything changes. That's both incredibly liberating and incredibly scary. And it's something that I have to remind myself of because I notice that the more I attach a sense of permanence to anything, the more I really start to get in not the most mentally healthy place.
Mhm, mhm.
So any weight gain that might happen or shifts in my body or a person's body during this time, we have to remember like our bodies are impermanent. They are always changing. That's the nature of reality. And so just like they're changing right now, they will continue to change. And a lot of people want to think, well, if it's shifting up in weight right now, then I can hope and think that it will shift down in weight later because bodies are impermanent. And to them, I would say that's still attaching a sense of permanence to the body you had before this whole pandemic happened, right? Like,
Sure, sure.
who knows? And if there's anything this pandemic is teaching me, personally, it's like practicing sitting with the discomfort of
Yes.
profound uncertainty. And I'm working on that, you know?
Yes. Well, and I love that, and I will applaud that in my clients. I'm like, look at you, like you are used to doing all of these negative things, like when uncertainty happens or when your emotions are here, and now you are sitting with it. Like that is amazing, and I applaud that because as uncomfortable as it is so good for your mental health long term to look your demons in the face, look at that anxiety in the face instead of resorting to all of the numbing behaviors. So I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So my body's changing, sure, maybe, I don't know, right now. And I also, the other thing I think about there is um, there are more important things than whether or not my body
Right,
changes, right?
right.
So,
Absolutely.
but
There are
and
definitely
also
more
not
important.
to invalidate anyone who's feeling that anxiety, like definitely I totally understand why that's so scary and so hard. And I also think it's important for us to be aware of the tendency we have to put our anxieties like into our body or onto our bodies when really it's like our don't give your body that much credit. Like it's not fair to assign blame to your body, and it's not even fair to give your body that much credit. Does that make sense what I'm saying? My kids are screaming in the background, so my brain isn't
Oh,
working
I don't
super well.
I don't hear him,
Okay.
um, but yeah, where it just, I mean, don't put so much weight, shall we say, on the body. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah. Okay. So it's valid if you are concerned about that. It's also maybe something to kind of lean into and say, okay, is this really about my body? Is there something beyond my body that I'm kind of it's a convenient thing to kind of obsess about my body versus thinking about the fact that I lost my job or
Absolutely.
something else. Yeah,
Yeah,
talk
because
speak to that a little
because
bit.
like if you weren't obsessing and worrying about your body or your weight, what is it that you'd be forced to look at and have to worry about? Because generally it's something else that's like, yeah, you really don't want to have to think about, you don't want to deal with. And so instead, our brains will protect us by shifting it to the body or something like that. Like, oh, let's fixate here. This is something we can control, even though, like, no, that's not really helpful long run.
Yeah, and it's often like a pattern that got started before you maybe even had the cognitive abilities you do now. So maybe you developed this sense of like, oh, it's easier to obsess or worry about my body than it is to worry about these other bigger things going on in my life. So I think a lot of times this is super ingrained, right? It's like it's maybe we can identify this isn't the most helpful, but a lot of times it's sort of the known and the comfortable.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's like I said, it's our brain's way of trying to protect us from something that's like scarier or something else that's unknown or not controllable. So here's something
How do
to
people access that? Like on a practical level, how does someone figure out is this really this concern about waking, or is it about something else? Like, do you have
I
any?
mean, my favorite question, like to ask is if how much time do you spend thinking about this per day? And like, if that suddenly wasn't a concern anymore, what is it that you'd spend that time thinking about? What would you be worried about instead? And I think that's really telling because they're like, oh, yeah, what is like the next thing on the list that, oh, it's really these underlying things, my relationships, or really I'm insecure with my skills as a parent, or yeah, just these other things that have less of a concrete solution versus weight gain or weight loss is more feels more controllable.
Feels more controllable, but
Yeah,
then there's even issues with that
right.
thinking. But yeah, like that's so, I love that point. And I think hopefully that kind of gives people something to think about, maybe even something to journal about. With if any of you feel like you have a bit more time on your hands right now than you felt like you've had in the past, I know some people are really reacting to me saying like boredom. It's really been interesting. People are like very offended
Huh.
that I said like this is sort of a time of boredom and like having more time. A lot of people are like, I'm not bored at all. I'm like, okay, I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm not saying
Okay.
it's a bad. I actually think boredom is great. I aim for a little bit of boredom whenever I can get it. So anyway, I just have found that kind of funny, people's reaction to my last episode. I talked about that.
Oh,
Um, but if you feel like you have a bit more time, on your hands right now, I think journaling as a practice and just free writing, what's going on, what are you feeling, what's coming up for you, what are you worried about, what might be underneath that. If you weren't worried about that, what else would be there? I love
Yeah.
that prompt, Shannon. That's really,
Yeah, that's
really,
the journal. That's the journal prompt for all the listeners. It's like, yeah, if you weren't worried about your body or the food right now, what would you be worried about? And then you can even go deeper and deeper. Okay, well, if that was suddenly solved, now what would you worry about? If that was solved, what would you worry about? Yeah.
yeah. Ooh, I love that. Okay, so what are some of the themes of like, I don't want to say solutions, but what are some things that we can do right now in our lives that can promote our mental health, that can nurture a sense of, well-being given so much heightened anxiety and uncertainty? What are some things we can be doing?
So, I mean, kind of what we touched on, I think making new routines and simple routines can be super helpful. I think journaling is another one of those things. I've been suggesting to a lot of my clients these online support groups. I've been seeing a few or getting emails about a few, whether it's like a body image or shame resilience or anxiety and stuff. But there's resources popping up on there, like online telehealth type of groups. Then I think those supportive groups can be so helpful when you're feeling really alone and isolated in something like you may, even though everyone in the world is going through this. But if you're not exposed to your friends or family so much anymore, you can feel really lonely. So support groups would be a big thing to add to that.
Yeah, and have you seen there's a group on Instagram that's doing like what's it called? It's like eating together. It's like
No way, great.
there's one in Spanish, it's comamos juntos, and then like there's one in English, I forget. It's like the same type of idea. I cannot think of what it's called.
Very
But
cool.
it's a kind of group meal support, and it's different clinicians are volunteering, and they're going live very regularly to kind of, the goal and the mission is to help people eat together and give some support for people who might be feeling alone or in kind of a hard place with their eating disorder or even their mental health in general.
Yeah, and
There's, like you
that
said,
sounds
there's
like
a
a great
lot of
idea.
great people doing a lot of giving away a lot of resources right now just because they recognize
Yes.
there's a real need. Sorry, what were you going to say, Shannon?
Oh, I don't know. I was just probably repeating something you said.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But eatingdisorderhope.com is the place where I've found most of like the listings of those groups though. So I know if people want to go to eatingdisorderhope.com, yeah, there's like a link on there for like support groups, online support groups. So you can see that many days during the week, at least Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday, maybe not Friday, Saturday day, Sunday day, I've seen different support groups pop up. So
That's
there's
awesome.
definitely
Okay,
things
I'll
there.
add that to the show notes so that people can just easily access that too. That's great.
Sweet.
Um, Anything else that people who are struggling with their mental health and or an eating disorder, what else would you want them to know right now?
Um, Lower their expectations of
Okay.
themselves. Yeah, I mean, yeah, take it easy on yourself. Like self-compassion. Like, holy cow, like you're living through a pandemic. Like, don't expect yourself to like, yeah, be kicking butt with everything in life. Like, holy cow, you're
No
living
one
through
is.
change.
No one.
Like, settle
I'm
down.
dropping all kinds of balls right now just so that everyone knows. I'll own that.
Yeah, and that's normal and okay and part of the human response to when there's something desperate, some desperate situation like this. Like, let it
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I love that. Um, okay. What else, like, what other advice would you have for people that we haven't covered already, or anything you might want to summarize?
Let's see. Um, I think now is a great time to do a social media cleanse. I think yeah, really being intentional about people who you like either add or things you unfollow that aren't helpful, because it's certainly not helpful to have like all like the Fitspiration stuff or the pro Anna stuff or the diet stuff. Like really, now that you maybe have the time to be a little more intentional about going through unfollowing those and maybe erasing photos from when you were in a sick body, that maybe maybe people go back and look at and reminisce. Maybe now would be a good time to go through and delete some of those pictures that are triggering for your eating disorder. We're doing the closet cleanse. Oh, that's another one. Closet cleanse.
What's
Getting rid
that?
of the getting rid of the sick clothes.
Oh, gotcha. Yes, yes. So
Yeah,
doing like a what fits me, making sure your clothes, your options are all gonna fit your current body.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you're not hanging on to those clothes that are a couple sizes too small that act as, yeah, motivation for your eating disorder to come back. So get rid of those clothes. Yeah.
I love that. So taking an inventory of what you're allowing into your mind with social media or with whatever ways you take in information that might not be very helpful for you right now. And then also, like, I love, love, love the idea of if you have a bit more time right now, maybe it's time to really set your environment up for being conducive to you,
Yes.
like being healthy and well in terms of having clothes that fit. That makes such a difference, honestly. That makes such a difference in how you feed yourself and how you care for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, just have clothes that fit your recovered body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or your recovering body. Yeah.
Recovering body.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would say like the things that I would add are you made the point of self-compassion, and I think I just want to like say that again because that was such a great point. We need like right now, I think we need as much kindness toward ourselves and toward each other as we can do. So,
Right.
um, you know,
Now's the time. Great
now
time
is the
for it.
time. Yes. So when you have those days where you don't want to get out of bed, don't beat yourself up. It's so normal. We're all feeling that way. And just remind yourself, like, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just a hard situation. That makes sense that it's hard to get out of bed in the morning, or it's hard to shower, or it's hard to whatever it's hard for you to do. Like, just know that you're not alone. And also know that being kind to yourself will go a lot farther and will make a really big difference versus, beating yourself up or being a bully to yourself. So self-compassion is something we can all maybe work on and focus on and improve on right now. And then the other thing I would say is like I have been kind of thinking of myself as like I'm just kind of being a mom to myself right now. Like, okay, now
Good.
it's time to like put your phone down and go outside. No more news for you. Like I'm not in a condescending way, but just in a way that's just like I just
Like
feel
you're
like right
great.
now I need a little extra care and I'm trying to give that to myself. Does that make sense?
I love that. I absolutely can see that. And I think I'd really benefit from, yeah, being like a little more of a mom to myself, being like, okay, Shannon, it's bedtime, right?
Yeah,
Like, hey, Shannon, time to go outside, get your dose of vitamin D or whatever. Yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
And you'll hear your own mom's voice in there and that'll be funny too. You'll laugh a little. It's like um okay. Well, Shannon, this has been fun. Thanks for your
Yes.
perspective. And um, let's just reiterate like, however you are feeling about this situation, however you're responding, it makes sense. There's no right way. And you're good and you're whole and you're wonderful, regardless of whether this has been somehow positive for you or a little bit of everything, or if this has been absolutely horrific for you. Like, we see you and we honor your experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for talking about this. It's nice to hear another person's perspective
Thanks so
on all
much,
this.
Shannon. How can people keep in touch with you and follow along with your work or reach out for an appointment or any of the above?
Yeah, so my website is www.moderneve.org. And I also have an Instagram with, I think, therapist underscore Shannon. And apparently I'm kind of like blowing up on TikTok this week. I decided to like try a TikTok video and it's going well. So apparently I'm following there, which is at Therapy Untucked is where you can find me there. So yeah, I have a few openings for telehealth therapy visits. So yeah, uh,
Awesome. Well, it's so good to connect with you, Shannon. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope all you listeners, I hope you're taking great care of yourselves and being gentle with yourselves and connecting with others virtually as much as you can. And I'm thinking about all of you. I'm wishing you the best.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.